Welcome everyone to our AGRE webinar. Just a bit of background, AGRE is the Association of Graduate Regulatory Educators, and we are a group of passionate educators who teach in the regulatory affairs and clinical research spaces. And we come together to try and further the knowledge of regulatory affairs globally. And I'm privileged to be on the board of AGRE. My name is Oren Chisholm, and I'm the Program Director of the Master of Science in Medicine program in Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Development at the University of Sydney in Australia. And some of my colleagues on the board are also on this call today. For our session today, we wanted to really look at some of the career pathways, and we've got some of our students joining us as well. So this is an open discussion, and we've got a couple of people that I would like to introduce you to. And feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, or put a question in the chat. If you're wanting to ask our two panelists any questions about their careers, any hints that they have for your careers as well as you're going through your career journeys. So welcome to Monique Carter. And Monique is a regulatory scientist, and she is Senior Director and Global Lead at Pfizer in the Global Regulatory Affairs and Global Product Development teams in internal medicine at Pfizer. And also welcome to Jessica Fritter. And Jessica is with Ohio State University. She teaches in the clinical research master's program there. And she's a certified professional clinical research professional. And I'm looking forward to both of them sharing some of their experiences and their career journeys with us here today. So I might ask you first, Monique, just to give us a little bit of background. So what education did you start off with? Where did you start your career? And so what degrees have you completed to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I'll start with that and also say thank you so much for inviting me, Oren. One thing she didn't mention is that although I'm in the US and she's in Australia, she was really a great mentor for me when I was trying to figure out some things as I got to more senior level, how to do things that were interesting and not the same run-of-the-mill type of thing. So really a role model for me personally. So thank you for the invite, Oren. But more so than that, just being a role model and someone I could watch to emulate certain things that I thought were impressive just about you and how you navigate in this career sector. So thank you for that. I went to undergrad in Texas. So I'm from the United States, a very rural part of Texas, I may add. So really didn't know many people who were going to college for anything other than veterinarian medicine or something to deal with animals, but I knew that I didn't want to do that. And so I was like, I know that I'm really good at math and science. So I got a bachelor's in biochemistry and physics. And then from that point, I went to work and got a master's degree from Johns Hopkins in regulatory science. But I did that while I was working initially at the bench, and then from there went to consulting, a boutique consulting firm for drug development, and then at that time went to get a master's at Johns Hopkins in regulatory science, and then a business certification through Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, just to understand kind of the business of healthcare and management. And I'm currently completing the Doctorate of Regulatory Science program at University of Southern California.
Thank you. And Jessica, what has your educational journey been?
Yeah, mine has been a little bit different. I did not have a science background as my undergrad, so I completed my undergraduate studies in communication studies from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington here in the States. And right out of college, I actually ended up working in the business atmosphere and worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies and getting my feet wet there and really realized that I did not love it. There was something really missing, and I had always thought about actually going into social work. And so I had the opportunity to move closer to family in Ohio. And I did so and got a job at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and quickly fell in love with clinical research. I am the textbook of just falling into the field, not having known that it was one. While I was working there, I got my master's in clinical research. It was the program I teach for now, but it was titled Masters of Applied Clinical and Preclinical Research. That's what my master's degree is in. And like Monique, I am getting my doctorate right now in a Doctor of Health Sciences from Eastern Virginia Medical School.
Excellent. So I guess you've both pursued degrees that are relevant to the work that you're currently doing. Were the degrees essential and beneficial to you actually obtaining the positions that you have within the industry? Jessica?
I think that I could have likely done okay in my job, quite well, if I didn't go to graduate school, just because there were quite a few people that I worked with who had gotten into regulatory science anyways, just with a bachelor's degree. So that was, I think, kind of the thing that happened, and you just grew with experience internally within a large company and kind of moved around. But I do think that having some type of formal education, that it's easier to break into regulatory science, because one of the big things that people say is that I would love to do it, but it's really difficult. It's like they would graduate with a PharmD, or they would have a PhD and they want to do regulatory science work, but they're like, it's just so difficult. I don't know anyone who can help me get into it. And everyone seems like they had 6 careers before they filtered into regulatory. So I do think that it was helpful from that standpoint, and also to learn just the fundamentals of the Code of Federal Regulations, how the FDA works, and how they communicate, how the divisions are split apart, and just what's considered case law, so to speak, when you talk about precedent for regulatory science. So I definitely think that it was a way to get a step above, to be able to go into regulatory and be able to move up quite quickly. Otherwise, I think most people start today with a bachelor's degree, probably in operations and not in strategy. So I don't think it's mandatory at all companies to enter or to move up the ladder. But I do know in some Fortune 500 biotech and development companies that if you don't have a certain level of degree, you can never get to senior director or VP. So it's something you'd have to do. So I think it makes life easier, and you feel more confident going forward if you have a degree that is aligned specifically to drug development or regulatory. It could just be in drug development or clinical management, or something about applied, how to design and run clinical trials. I think it's very useful. But if you're interested more in operations, I don't know that it's mandatory.
And Jessica, what about in clinical research?
Yeah, I think that, it depends on what you want to get out of your position and out of your career. I think is really the basis. And any of my mentees, that's the one thing I always talk to them about is, where do you want to go? And even if you don't know, that's totally fine. But it's one of those things to think about, because there's a lot of different avenues. I think for myself and my journey, and before I made the transition to be, fully teaching at Ohio State and for the master's program and the undergraduate level, I was in those higher up positions and those managerial positions. And I think having my degree 1,000% helped me get to those places. And also it taught me, though, a lot. I had worked, primarily at a pediatric institution. So, I did INDs, I did IDEs, I did all of that in the ped setting. But my formal education allowed me to learn so much more than what I was going to get just by being on the front lines. And so I do think that helped prep me for some of those higher up roles, different things along those lines. And now having a career in education, 1,000%. You know, you have to have it to be in these positions and get your doctorate and those types of things. But it definitely still helps though, learn that side of it and learn that side of, you know, when you do want to educate about clinical research or, you know, pharmaceuticals, you really get the crux of everything that you're really trying to get across to the students.
So I note that you're both pursuing higher degrees. So as you've gone up the ladder and in your careers, have you seen a need for going on and doing the doctoral level degrees within your fields?
So for me, I was at a crossroads. I knew that I either was going to get my doctorate so that way I could go the professor route and, you know, go that route with what I wanted to do as a career, or I was, you know, going to look at going towards the VP or, you know, vice chair routes, those kinds of ways of being at the actual institutions and settings. And this past year was just really, for me personally, a year that I took time while I started my doctorate program of what do I want to do? And so for me, it was I love teaching, I love mentoring, I love being creative, I love having that free expression. And so it made sense, you know, I wanted to go straight towards higher education. And either way, I was gonna, you know, I knew I would want my doctorate. Did I need it if I was gonna go the VP route? Maybe not. But I knew that in today's climate, when it comes to going up to those higher roles, it just helps you. Getting my certification through the Association of Clinical Research Professionals in clinical research, again, is something that I knew would just help build my CV. Not necessarily a requirement, but I always look at what are those tools that are going to help me and anybody that I talk to help you look like the best candidate when you go for an interview.
Yeah, for me, I would say that the doctorate route was really more about personal curiosity. Like, do I feel like I would need to be in that program to get to a senior level somewhere like Pfizer? I think the answer is no, because I was already a senior director and on that track anyways, but I mainly did it because of the program at the University of Southern California. I was really interested in the fact that you got to travel to places ex-US that I have traveled to before, but it wasn't to go and have discussions with regulators. Like being able to actually go to the regulatory bodies and going and looking at their labs and viewing them and seeing how they do things and really hearing firsthand with them, having the opportunity to communicate with them about overarching challenges and things that are considered positions just from a global regulatory perspective interested me without having to go talk specifically about a program and negotiate what's going to happen in the phase 2 proof of concept study. So I felt like it was just really something I didn't think that could come through a program. And so that for me was really a sweet spot about the USC program. And then also the people I met. So my network expanded significantly. People who were educators, who were health authority, they worked FDA staff somewhere within the agency, people who worked across industry that I learned a lot about their structure, how they do stuff, how things work that's significantly different from my own experience in past and currently at Pfizer. So it was really that I felt I could truly gain a lot from the program. I felt like the administrators put a lot of time and effort into it. So the leader there, Frances Richmond, when I first started, she just really took it upon herself to say, this is a great program. They took so much, it was like a white glove treatment, I would say, going through it. And they really get to understand you and so many opportunities. So I was like, I would feel remiss if I weren't a part of it because I thought that I would learn a lot and I wasn't disappointed. So, and I could also bring back a lot of those learnings to people within my team, junior people, learning more so about research at that level and how to do it just from a regulatory perspective. So it was initially personal curiosity and knowing that I would learn a lot, but the value I got from it is that I could share a lot with my junior colleagues about different opportunities to learn, to be in programs, certification programs and things like that. So it was more so that I could grow as a professional. I wasn't really thinking of it more thinking of it as like a stepping stone to get promoted, because I felt like I could do that just through hands-on work and management through my role at Pfizer.
Mhm. Excellent, thank you. So my colleagues, please feel free, if anyone wants to ask a question, to raise your hand or type a question in the chat, and we can throw that to our panelists. But while I'm waiting to see if anyone has a question, so Nishi, have you got a question?
No.
No, your microphone is on, so I was just thinking you might have a question. To any of my other colleagues.
Hi, Oren. Sorry to.
Melissa.
I'm too slow to type into the chat, so I thought I better just open up my microphone.
Good.
So thank you both for such interesting perspectives. Jessica, you being in academics now, and Monica, you being in the pharma industry. For some of our students that are trying to break into pharma, they're coming from the lab bench, or they're changing careers, so to speak. They're maybe in biotech or pharma, but they aren't in regulatory. So maybe they're in a CRA role, maybe they're in, as I say, the lab bench. How did you feel the regulatory degree helped you, leverage that, or maybe you were already in a role that you could cross talk, so to speak? You were on a program development team, Monica, so you meet with regulatory, you meet with clinical, you meet with the basic researchers and the CMC manufacturing and things like that. Can you give some guidance of those early days, if you recall, how you started to make your career path?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really great comment, because one of the big things is after you graduate from college and go work at the bench. That was me. So I worked at UT Southwestern before I got into biotech. So I was there and I thought the science was great, but I was like, I do not want to be injecting rats for the next 10 years. I like them, but not really wanting to be a bench scientist going through. I want to be closer to the bedside, what was going to impact a larger amount of patients instead of working on a direct protein. So it's like, well, what am I going to do? So I looked into a lot of different opportunities, and there were so many things I wanted to do that I was like, well, maybe I should look into some type of consulting role, management consulting or boutique consulting, so I can see a lot of different projects across companies. So I did start actively looking for positions like that, or it could have just been in a biotech, but I was able to get a role in a boutique company that was for management consulting. So they conducted different types of research programs and Congress coverage for big Fortune 500 companies. So I started there. I really learned disease states. It was focused on oncology, and I built my knowledge up enough to understand what was medical affairs, what was commercial, what was regulatory, what are all the different line functions that I had the opportunity to work with then in a company. So when I got there, what would I maybe be interested in doing? And so the thing that was of interest to me was that they all kind of blurred. So it's like, well, which one am I going to choose? Because so long as you have the core tenets, I think, of the drug development process as it relates to US, and if you're trying to do something ex-US, as long as you have those underpinnings and knowledge of how drug is developed, like what kind of preclinical studies do you have to have before you can go into human? What type of human studies do you have to have in volunteers before you get to patients, to get to the pivotal trials? Just having that really good knowledge of how the drug development life cycle works, I felt like I could work across really any of those functions. And so initially I started more so in clinical development. I worked on doing opening INDs and stuff for first in human studies, and started understanding how things that happened in animals could translate over into that first study in human. That was a place where a lot of more experienced colleagues weren't interested. So they want the big phase 3 pivotal trial going for the approval. But early stage is just as important. Focus on safety, focus on getting the drug into the clinic. And that's really where I honed in for very early stage, just to really understand that process. I did a lot of work ex-US with China, Japan, and Asia Pac, because a lot of people when I worked initially didn't want to travel, or the regulations in those areas were always changing. So they'd be like a last wave of countries where you go for approval. So it was the big above country markets like US and Europe that everyone was interested in. So it was taking the opportunities on the slither of a niche that most people weren't overly interested in, but I felt like I could really hone in, get some expertise and use that enough to be able to open the gate to do stuff that was larger across the development cycle. But I would say the key thing was honing in on understanding drug development, also looking for opportunities, building a network where I could reach out to people and say, this is what I'm interested in. I know you're really busy, but if you could speak to me about it, I'd be grateful. And I had a lot of people who were shockingly very helpful. And so I learned early stage, like I said, a space where most people weren't overly interested, and was able to really beef up my knowledge there, and made myself more marketable and was able to move around quite easily. That was what helped me to transition over into Pfizer.
So
And
Monica,
now,
just to follow up on that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, that you were going into, in the old days of regulatory where I worked in pharma, we had division of international. You dealt with international and the subsidiaries and people of the smaller countries, and then the big regulatory, as you say, US, EU, and Japan sometimes. But getting your foot in the door for that international, did you find that you were going in as an entry level, and then you were being mentored by more everybody has different titles, but say you went in as a regulatory specialist and then you were being mentored by a director or a manager or something like that. Is that how it kind of played out for you?
Well, so when I first started out, I had a lot of experience just about drug development and I was in oncology, and a lot of knowledge about the different tumor types. So I had that knowledge. So when I went in, I would say I was probably at the manager level, but yes, very junior. And then I transitioned over to work for a Rogue Pharmaceutical. So that was a biotech company that didn't have any drugs approved, but they had some late stage and early stage development. And I had some guidance from senior level people, but it wasn't an overt amount. So it was really working with different people within CROs, different contractors, consultants that we had in order to support the early stage development and what we were trying to do in Asia. But a lot of support from them, and learned a lot from them. They were open to allowing me to shadow, but I found that I had to be the one to initiate and ask that. So they're really busy trying to get it done in a smaller environment. They wear so many hats. So I had to be really explicit about what I wanted to do. I had one colleague that was a mentor to me, and she always said, don't be an Alice, like not, well, wherever this takes me, that's where I'll go. Be more specific and say, I really want to know this. And then it might evolve to other things, but be specific about your ask of people, because they only have so much time, but they're really willing to help you. And I found that to be true. So a lot of senior colleagues did support me, whether they came from a CRO that we were working with, or really, really smart consultants that we worked with regulatory for ex-US initiatives. But I had to make a direct ask for them to support me, knowing that they had limited bandwidth.
Thank you very much. Jessica, just to kind of turn on the different kind of side of it, you pursued your master's, and you definitely knew you wanted to go into academics. So what turned the tide for you to say, I don't really want to go to industry, I want to go to academics and teach?
I think, there was a multitude of things. I started, from the site perspective and working and being a project coordinator, project manager, moving my way up into management of the clinical research infrastructure. And I think a lot of it came down to the greater purpose of what I wanted to leave behind, and my legacy of what I know in the field and in clinical research, and what I had gone through, what I had, dealt with. And it was more the, passion to teach to the students about the career and get the word out that this is a career. This is something that people can plan to go into and work. And I I really had, I think, a moment of when you're working in, especially academics, but let's say like the site initiations, and in that setting of it, there's so much that goes into that, as we all know. But with the politics of the, well, who's gonna do this trial, what's gonna happen, all of that piece of it, I didn't want to be the one to continue to fight those battles. I wanted to be the one to make sure that I was educating people on how to prepare themselves for those battles. I had had plenty of battles myself that I had to go through amongst, leadership. That's just what spoke to me. And there were times that, I thought about going into industry and pharma and, making that transition and going that route. But the more and more that I looked at it, the more and more that I can't break my training and my education background that I just love so much.
Thank you very much.
I think there are questions in the chat, but yeah.
There was just a question in the chat about the doctoral program that you were doing, Monique. So I've just put a link in the chat there
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Maureen.
to answer
and
that
I'll
one.
put, the link to the one that I am in as well.
Yep. And yeah, Jessica, you can put your doctoral program in.
And I
Excellent.
think that the question in there of how selecting the program. So this is something I talk to a lot of people about when it comes to, even thinking about getting your doctorate, even thinking about getting your master's, and thinking, do you need it? What is it that you're going to get out of it? Is it curiosity like Monique had in the actual depth of it? I have promised my loved ones that this is my last education that I'm getting, but we all know that's probably not true because I love education. And I have that curiosity like Monique does, and you see something, you're like, oh, well, what can I get out of this? But I think it's really important to take a step back and think about what is it that's going to, one, give your CV that full roundedness. What is that extra thing that is going to help balance you out? For me, when I looked at my portfolio, communication studies, I love talking to people, I'm doing it, it's helped me with my presentations, great, glad I got it. Clinical research, I have my master's in. And so when looking at getting my doctorate, I really wanted to, have something that spoke to that health science spectrum. I did not, have that science background or even that healthcare, kind of education for me. So that's why I chose the doctorate program that I did. So I always say, look at all of them, pull different ones, there's PhD in organizational development. There's so much out there that just do your research and see which one speaks to you and which one you actually think you're going to get a lot out of. That's my biggest piece of advice when it comes to looking at higher education, whether it be your master's or your doctorate.
So
Yeah, I
really
definitely would
yeah.
agree. I was going to agree with that. For me, another part was obviously the financial piece. So it was easy for me to make a decision on the program that I wanted because I have financial support from Pfizer. So they support me financially to do the program and also give me time and space to be able to do it. So definitely from a technical capability perspective, it's been great. Just enhance and learn things I didn't know, but then also the social side of how to network. I think that's been built in. And then another element was the business portion of some of the things I've been able to do at Wharton School of Business, just because in regulatory science and clinical development, there's an element of the business. So with the science background and only being trained in things that are science, it's important to have a level of acumen where you can understand how to work cross-functionally with other groups like commercial, the marketing team and all of that, and really understand from their perspective how things work. Not saying that influences me, it definitely does, and I don't think of it day to day as a regulatory strategist and really focus on patients and safety, but because we do have to work in a matrix environment from that perspective, just understanding the operation and how that goes on and organizational behavior and how teams are structured and how deliverables have to be met was important for me too. So that was one of the reasons why I chose to also do that in addition to something that was more technically focused, because I think that's really important when working in pharma.
So I'm hearing from both of you that you have like intentionally looked at where your strengths and gaps in your knowledge are to then pursue various degrees to help you fill those gaps and round you out as a professional in your careers. Yeah, good. So you've both, I think, mentioned mentors as well, and just wondering about the impact of both formal and informal mentors on your career choices as you've gone through your careers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a
that's been
big-
really huge for me. You go ahead, Jessica.
I was just say I'm a big advocate for, doing informal interviews at your institution with your professors, with, anybody that you really meet. Nowadays you can't get a job unless you network and unless you have those relationships with people. And it's really important. I think, LinkedIn is such a huge resource for people. And when it comes to, if there's a field that you're interested in, if there's a company that you're interested in, search for it in LinkedIn and try and connect with somebody. I can tell you most professionals, we are so willing to meet, to talk, to help guide, to build that mentorship. I have had some outstanding, amazing mentors in my life who are still just as close to me, and I still call them for advice or, about different situations. And I have one for many different things. And I think that's the thing to think about. I have my mentors who are the education realm and who, solely help me understand that field. I have my mentors who are at the site. I have even mentors that work for CROs. And, we get to understand those things. I have mommy mentors. I mean, like, you can have mentors in all these different spaces of your life. And it's really important to form that community for yourself. And it's something that me now as a mentor to my mentees is to really make sure that I'm giving that to them, that they are understanding that, okay, what can I help you with? And then what else do you need help with? Who else can we connect you with? So that way they feel grounded and they feel like they can make an impact and make a difference and find something that they love. But I am like the biggest advocate when it comes to mentoring, networking. Don't feel afraid, especially in today's day and age. LinkedIn is the easiest way to connect. You can do it behind a screen and, not worry if somebody is going to connect with you or message you back. But it's really important because that's how we build this community. It's how we get to know one another. It's how we get to help each other. And a lot of the things and challenges that one faces, we're all facing together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think everything you said is quite perfect. But I think it's valuable. And then also when you are dealing on LinkedIn, which I think is great for a person with a scientific background, which sometimes different types of personalities might not be overly vocal and might not be the one who wants to go out to eat and talk about themselves a lot, but it is a lot easier to do it through LinkedIn. And then so many companies have programs that are teed up just for students. So you're getting near graduation or you just graduated. It's so many different pathways and pipelines you could take in order to be considered for a lot of really great programs that could lead to increased development, but then also to full-time employment, or just getting that experience that you need to go get the dream job that you want. So I think LinkedIn is a good stop for that. And just reaching out and understanding what's for students, what programs are open, if it's a paid internship that you need or a short-term something that you could do, just to say, I want to be able to shadow and I really would be interested in this program. And this is the reason why this is the rationale for you picking me, basically. So a person feels like they really want to pour into you, because most people have had a mentor and they want to pay it forward, but the convenience of being able to do so sometimes is not so clear. So I always say to students that that's the best way to move forward. At Pfizer, 2 years ago, we created a Global Regulatory Affairs Preceptorship Program. We really hadn't thought about it at all, but one of the students was like, I really want to be in regulatory strategy. I live in the DC area. but there's no way for me to get in. I wanted to potentially work at the FDA, but that wasn't an option. And I just want to understand what industry is about. I don't have any family members, and I want to do regulatory specifically because they'd had experience in medical affairs and clinical, and they felt as though there were so many people that they could reach out to and link to be able to have those opportunities, but not regulatory. So it took that one conversation just for me to link to people within the university and others within Pfizer, and we started a full-blown pilot program. And this year, we expanded it to a full program across 7 different universities. So it's just like that one initial spark of someone saying, I'm interested, this is why, this is what I feel like I'm missing and I need, that there could be people that are really ready to fill in the gap for what it is that the student really needs and make that opportunity available for a lot of other students. So I think the big thing is just speaking up and out about what it is you really want to do. And it's likely that someone will pick up the torch and help to bridge to where a student is trying to get to.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from anyone who's joined? Please don't feel shy. Please turn your microphone on and ask a question.
Yes, I had a question. First, obviously, thank you guys very much. Everything you're saying is fantastic. You guys have great perspectives also, like Melissa had said, taking kind of on both sides, and I can relate to both. I am currently in a dual degree program at the University of Georgia in the United States. So I finished my bachelor's of science in pharmaceutical sciences in last spring, and I will finish my master's in regulatory sciences in this coming spring. So I'm right at the very beginning of my career journey. I wanted to hear from you both, if you've taken on like senior roles and management roles in your time there with new entry-level candidates and junior candidates for jobs. What did you see that made certain candidates maybe really successful in their positions? And then what did you look for in ones with your reviewing applications and things like that?
You want to go first?
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
I can.
You can go first. I'll do the second.
Okay. Yeah. So I get the opportunity of being in on a lot of these discussions with some people that are at the entry level, and I always think it's a special time because it's so many things you can learn, but it's also so many things you can bring to the table because you've had your own experiences, right? So I think for me, the first thing from a regulatory perspective is ensuring that students actually have like an interest in regulatory science. You can have a broad interest in drug development, but if it's a person who has taken the time to say, I went to undergrad and now I'm specifically focused on regulatory science, so much so that they went the distance to be in a master's program, for me, that definitely is the differentiating factor because it takes a certain kind of person to say, that's what I want to do and that's what I'm moving forward with. And I know that regulatory is something that they have thought about. So for me, that's really important. And would definitely pick up on that quickly. And then just ensuring that the person has some kind of knowledge of the drug development process, obviously not an expert because you have the opportunity to grow and develop in a really good company with people who have been where you are and want to support you. I always look at their, what level of enjoyment they seem to get from research, understanding precedent, understanding the different triggers and pros and cons and benefit risk of drug development and having those types of conversations. So I think it's just the eagerness to really work in the field. Maybe they say, my goal is to be able to, in my first 90 days of work on a team where I'm helping support IND submission, or I'm helping support getting a study started, or I'm helping to support different things. So being able to specifically maybe tease out the things you really like and expressing why and saying what you want to learn. So no one expects you to have a multitude of experience because none of us did during our first job. But even not having that, just saying what it is that you look forward to doing and why based on what you learned in studies. For me, that always stands out in a candidate. And I always look forward to supporting those types of candidates and mentoring them. I know we've had some applicants who say, I'm really excited, but I'm nervous because I don't know what the expectations will be. But you always will have a person, your manager, typically most of the managers I work with, and as the manager myself will say, well, these are the kind of things, let's align on the expectations, what's important to you, then what we need as business needs, and then move forward that way and stay connected and always have a mentor. But standing out initially would be the fact of going for a program and then being able to identify, do you like early stage, do you like late stage? Maybe you don't know but you are like, this is direction I think that would be good for me. I always am interested in candidates like that, Erica. You said you graduate in the spring of this year?
Yes, I will finish my master's program in the spring. And right now, what I've really been interested in is like kind of like late stage in terms of post-market surveillance and data safety data and pharmacovigilance. That's where I'm really interested in, because when I first started my bachelor's degree, I was interested in kind of like adverse events and seeking new and better formulations for things like psychiatric medicine and things that are so needed that have some, terrible side effects that don't really have a lot of options. And so I started there, and I learned about the regulatory program. And just like you, like being at the bench, that's where I started. So I like science, I knew that's what I wanted to do. But then learning about this bigger picture and seeing how even my advisor, which is something like I can relate to with Jessica a lot, I had a great educator and advisor who brought that to me and said, you can either help, this many people, bedside, or you can do regulatory and help, millions of people and impact so many people. So that's kind of where I ended up. But I followed the same thing where I'm really interested in the pharmacovigilance and that kind of post-market surveillance and things like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Just because from a regulatory perspective, we do work with safety risk leads and people who only look at safety aggregate reports. But when it comes to labeling, when it comes to oversight, if you're going to have a box warning, if you have to have warnings and precautions in the label, of course, we lead those discussions with labeling leads, including safety. But we have a part of how that's going to be aligned with guidance for the different regions and how we move forward with labels. Doing those reviews for the protocols, if you have some type of event where something went wrong in a trial, how to manage that from a safety perspective. So I do feel like in regulatory strategy, you have an end to that, but that's not the only thing. You also get to touch around every other line function in a matrix and be present and helping those discussions to make decisions, and then get to go and share whatever the position is with the health authority. So I do think that if you have such a strong interest in safety, regulatory strategy is a good route. And you also obviously have the option to do something from a specific safety line function perspective. But I would look forward to being on LinkedIn together, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, Erica, I love your question when a lot of people ask that, what are you, from our perspective, what would you look for in a candidate, or, when someone's coming in for your interview, and Monique hit everything right there, nail on the head for you. I will say the one thing I always tell students who go from their undergrad to their graduate program, and you miss out on some of those, I don't want to say miss out, but you don't have those, 3 years of work experience in between them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything like that. The one key I like to give you, I'm just giving you a note, that way you can, land this job that you love and you want, is make sure that on your resume or CV, however you put it together, that you list those projects that you worked on in your undergrad career and in your graduate programs. Because that really that's experience, that's work experience. You worked in a group setting, you are working on the things that we work on in this field. It just may not have been a paying job. So make sure you list those things, make sure that you really boast and talk about what you've learned in your programs. Because I do think that sometimes I've had colleagues who are, oh, well, they got their master's and, they don't have 10 years and 5 years. And like, nobody has 5 years anymore. So really just show that you've worked on those projects, what you love to do. You sound very enthusiastic, so I think you already have that going for you. But your attitude going into, that's the one thing I always look at a candidate. What is their attitude coming into here? They could have a stellar resume, but not be able to bring either positivity, flexibility, understanding, be able to articulate what they've learned in their program. So that's my only one thing that I wrote down. I want to make sure I said was, make sure you do boast up your topics, talk about those projects that you've done, show that you have that relation to what you're wanting to do, and make sure to have questions in your interview. Research the company, research the people, understand what they do, understand, maybe what are some of the trials they've worked on. They love that. So make sure you do that. Make sure you do that extra work beforehand.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have any other questions? So maybe just one other question from me. If you were looking back at your younger selves, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself about your career and pursuing your career journey? Monique.
I would say to be flexible and to be nimble and to be sure that all of the skills that you are working so hard to gather, that you can repurpose the narrative and flip them to fit other situations that you might not have thought about, but might be exactly where you need to be. So I was like, oh, I'm such a great scientist. And, you know, I had done so much with the American Chemical Society and I got a scholarship there. So I'm like, I'll be a bench scientist and I love research and all of that. But it was as I got older, I was like, oh, I can't really see this being a fit for my personality and the type of life that I'd like to have, the impact that I would like to have. It just wasn't there, but I really love science. And I was like, well, I don't want to pivot to something that's more business-like because I'm not really that person either. So how can I bring that along with building new skills and then find somewhere that I really think is where I authentically want to be. And so I had to really learn as I was flying the plane, trying to build it together, of how to pivot based on these are the skills I have, this is what I love to do, how do I package it for this opportunity or that opportunity? Because initially I was just like tunnel vision on, I'll be a lab scientist, until I really got to a large research center and figured out really quickly that my favorite protein is not as attractive as I thought it was. So I need to think of some other ways to pivot. But the thing was, I already had the skills to be able to. I just had to realize it and learn how to package it. And it was when I started looking at what other people had done that seemed to have similar personalities as myself. And I could look up and say, well, oh, what track were they on? A lot of different opportunities for careers that I wasn't even aware existed. I found out because I was flexible and willing to take a zigzag type of approach to get somewhere different and say, what's a great experience, and it will help me to build on my goal of trying to get to big pharma, because I felt like if I could do that, maybe I would get into one line function and I might love it or I might not, but it would be easier for me to pivot around to be able to do stuff in a lot of different function lines. And I found that to be true, having the example of working in a small biotech, working in consulting, and then getting to a big pharma. It's so many opportunities just to zigzag across, shift. If I wanted to work in health evidence outcomes research, I could go reach out to someone and do a 6-month stint of that and maybe change course. So I feel like it would be a good way for flexibility, but I feel always taking your skills, really understanding what they are and being able to package them to serve you the best. So I would have told myself to really prioritize that. And don't negate the value of just getting to know each other, getting to know different people, and really knowing yourself, but then meeting people who aren't always like you so that they can say to you, oh, you know, maybe that's a gap you could work on and I can help you. So I think the networking component, but just being open to pivoting and then repackaging and rebranding yourself moving forward.
Thank you. And Jessica.
I would probably tell myself not to feel like there's a timeline, and to really make sure to know that, because I think early on, you know, I worked in business for so long that when I made the transition over into healthcare and clinical research, I felt as though I didn't add up to anybody. You know, I felt as though I didn't, you know, oh, I know nothing. And one of my division chief, who is a great mentor of mine, she told me, she goes, stop that. You know, you just had a different track than everybody else. And what I did in business and working in finance and, you know, doing all of that, then helped really transition me into roles that I worked on study feasibility. I worked on budgets. I helped oversee organizational budgets. And so you know, there was that cross translation. I needed to give myself a little bit
I think we've lost Jessica.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't for sure if it was my computer or
Yeah,
not.
I think Jessica's just frozen. But taking from that, I think no experience is a bad or a lost experience. You can always build on all of the different experiences you've had. And as Jessica was saying, you know, her previous experiences in business helped her when she moved over into a clinical role, because she already understood how to do all the financing aspects of running the clinical trials, for instance. So so for our students, I think that's a pivotal thing to remember, that none of your experiences are, you know, you don't throw them in the bin, you keep them and you build on them as you're going through your careers. So any last words or any last questions from anyone?
What opportunities exist for high school students to get into the regulatory affairs and clinical research fields? Like someone who's a junior and now is going to move towards college applications. Like, is there any research they could even do right now, or any projects to help them move on?
I know for Pfizer, we have some different efforts that go on with our Kendall Square Cambridge colleagues at that site. I don't think they're specific to regulatory. I think it's more so related to bench research, but I personally am not involved. We, from a regulatory perspective, typically just discuss things from my site where I work in Pennsylvania. We typically just talk about scientific method, experimentation, and those types of things, but don't get into the whole host of details about drug development. So I'm not really active in that space, but more so with the colleagues I work with, we focus on students coming from a PharmD program, our master's program, or straight from undergrad. But I don't have a lot of experience from a high school perspective. Maybe Jessica knows more about that.
Yeah, can you, sorry, I got and I'm good now, but can you repeat what the question was? I heard kind of high school, undergrad, but I didn't get the full.
It's more like, you know, like I also saw like I was reading like PPD, they have internships, but I think for sophomores, but I would expect that would be more for college students who are already college students. But then I came across Regeneron, and I saw posts by them, and they mentioned that about high school students who are already doing research and who could submit their research work to the Regeneron, and that was further being considered by them. So I realized that there are high school students who are already even having done research already in regulatory affairs and clinical research, and also have publications already. So I was wondering how they get into that. My daughter's currently a junior and is looking to move on in that direction. So
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. It really just depends on what's around you. Merck is another organization that has a lot of new internship programs that they put together. Some of them are geared from the undergraduate, or while they're, you know, people are completing their undergrad to then move into. I don't know if they have anything geared towards high school students. Our community college here is actually working on a clinical research program that high school students here in our area, they can, you know, take courses at the community college, and they overlap with their high school credits. So that's something that may be available that, you know, works towards that, gets that exposure. We have created an undergraduate certificate at Ohio State. So for those who come in and do their undergrad program, usually it's their junior year. Once they're in their undergrad program, they can then apply and take the certification that gives them a certification of clinical trial sciences. But from a high school perspective, there are organizations out there. ICANN is one of them. It's the international, I'm going to mess it up. Look for ICANN. they actually, sorry, my dog, they are a program that works with high school students who are interested in research. And I believe it actually, some of them, depending on your geographic location, they have students that are enrolled that are even 8 or 9 years old, that are just interested in clinical research and within their group, within their region. So there's one for Central Ohio. There's ones all over the globe, to be honest with you. They do different things. They either do different projects, they presented at conferences. There's a lot out there. So it's not unheard of. It definitely is something. And I think it's something, an area that's continuing to grow, because as someone who has been a recruiter, someone who's been trying to get people into this field, an educator, we are trying to start at that high school level to even get them to know that clinical research and regulatory affairs and regulatory sciences is something they can do. So we have those initiatives out there, we're trying, but I think it's still in its infancy of really kind of getting from that level. But there are things out there though.
Thank you very much.
Yep, definitely. And I know in Australia, there are a lot of my colleagues are going out and talking to high school students and teachers, science teachers of high schools, about different career options that are available within industry. So it's just trying to raise the awareness of these different types of careers. I do a lot of outreach to the undergraduate level programs as well, about the careers that they can look at within industry as well. So people are trying to broaden the reach of regulatory affairs and clinical research careers. But a major recommendation is make sure that your child has very strong foundations in science and mathematics.
And I just put the link in there for the ICANN organization. So you can definitely look into that as well. It's a great organization. I highly, recommend if it's something that you're interested, or seeing if there's a chapter by you that your daughter could, look at becoming a member of.
It's called the IKN. Is that what that is?
Yes, I put the link in the chat. So
Okay.
their URL is icannresearch.org.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I'll look more into that. And because right now, because it's it goes reverse in the sense, then they take courses because they feel, okay, this is something there already is. And then the courses they'll take will be more focused also. So more science and math. So thank you for your advice.
Excellent. Well, I think I might close the webinar now, but as our panelists have said, please reach out to them on LinkedIn, start making those connections and networking, really focus in and do some self-assessment about what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you want to focus, and then have a look at different programs that might be able to fill the gaps in your knowledge to make sure that you're the best candidate when you're going for job applications. So thank you very much, Monique. Thank you very much, Jessica. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. And I hope everyone has a good evening and afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.